What is New School Dance? New School Dance can be broken into two general terms, hip-hop dance and house dance. From the late 80s, dancing with hip-hop music and house music developed a new school style of hip-hop and house dance, which soon spread over all of America and then was launched upon the rest of the world. The one person who is said to have helped start the spread of hip-hop is Stretch from Mop Top's Elite Force, who joined the old school dance styles of popping, locking and breaking with the new school dance style. Now he is seen as the creative originator of what is now known as hip-hop dance in general. Eric B. and Rakim, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross and Mariah Carey are just some other top artists who have used hip-hop dance in their music video releases. They all continue to have an influence on the world scene, also helping to create new moves. To continue, the one man who helped establish the street dance scene of house dance was Khalif. He was a member of Mop Top's Dance Fusion and witnessed the early times of hip-hop. He is seen as a big representative for hip-hop culture as a whole. In the 90s, Shishi Peniston was the first to use house dance, and from then on saw many other artists using the dance in their music videos. It started in America, and with the help of these people, spread to Asia and Europe through workshops, and they are still helping house dance to expand. Another original member of Mop Top's Elite Force, Link, had a strong helping in seeing new school dance spread throughout the world. Other top artists like Michael Jackson, Mariah Carey and Will Smith have used it numerous times in their music videos. Now it is being used in showcases and workshops around the world, keeping its vitality in high action. These people, because they are the originators, need to be recognized. That is why we are going to make the history of the new school clear for you.
People want to know their history. You know, you can't know where you're going until you know where you've come from. What people don't seem to understand is that wherever the music takes off, there's always a dance to go with it.
Let's get back to the dancing.
People really want to learn, you know, what the dance is, what the vocabulary is, what the culture behind it is. And that's a resurgence in the new school across the board. So we're going to discuss the origins of hip-hop as a culture and hip-hop as a dance. Hip-hop culture started in the South Bronx, 1973, in the Sedgwick and Cedar houses. And, you know, it came out of Black and Latino culture of the 60s and the 70s. Hip-hop as a dance comes, you know, from the same culture, you know, in the 70s, before they actually called anything hip-hop. It was just, you know, different parts of the city had their own expression of hip-hop culture. In the Bronx, they had b-boying and, you know, MCs and DJs. But in Brooklyn, we had, you know, what was called, you know, it was b-boying in the Bronx, but in Brooklyn, they called it the freak style. And then we had, you know, in the Bronx, they had rocking, and in Brooklyn, we had our own version called Brooklyn rock. And that all gave way to the culture of, you know, hip-hop in terms of, you know, once it caught on to the mainstream. And then hip-hop dance came out of the exploitation of, you know, the hip-hop culture. After the movies, Beat Street, Breakin', Breakin' 2, you know, all the commercials and tours, you know, the dance aspect of it, i.e. b-boying, popping and locking, kind of died down. It was considered played out. So what happened was a lot of the dancers that were either poppers or b-boys, you know, just got into just strictly dancing, which is just straight social dances. And what happened was, after the, you know, the Beat Street era, as we call it, we just started taking those dances and combining them all together. And, as the B-boys, like to call it freestyle. But we just called it hip-hop. And the reason we called it hip-hop was because those dances that were being done at the time were all done to specific hip-hop records. What separates hip-hop dance from B-boying is because B-boying was done to breaks and funk. Now, the breaks came from funk records, from salsa records, from rock records. But hip-hop, when you did the WAP, you did it because B-Fats made a rap record, a hip-hop record called Do the WAP. We did the Happy Feet to Dougie Fresh, the show. You do the James Brown to Super Lover C, and, they did a song called Do the James, so you did the James Brown to that song.
So basically you had songs that had dances to the song.
Exactly.
So when those songs came on, you did that dance. You didn't do no other dance, just that dance. It's like later you start adding different steps and changing the step and doing it different ways. But whenever that song plays, you can play that song today, and people who knows that dance automatically goes to that dance.
And what happened was, being that a lot of the dancers came out of popping or breaking, those elements remained mixed with the social dances, and that's how hip hop came about. And when we all got together, we just took, everything that we all did, and just, it was a mix and match and a mash of every style. And that's how hip hop came about. And the same thing with house. House culture comes from, the disco culture. And, it's sort of the younger cousin of hip hop. But, that's why, they call the styles that we do freestyle, because it's a mixture of styles. But all styles are basically the same. They're freestyles, they're social dances before they become styles. And so around, the late 80s, the mid to late 80s is when the Beat Street era died down and the hip hop era started. And in the 90s is when it flourished, and exploded and became a national scene and then an international scene, all the way to now and today. And as the music changed, the dances changed. I just think people, tend to forget why they got into this culture in the first place. And we never have. We got into it because of the music and the love for music. And I think that's what's missing. It's an art form, and people, you should treat it as such. What's up, y'all? Buddha Stretch, Elite Force Crew, Mop Top.
What's up, Link, Elite Force Crew, Mop Top.
We're here in the park in New York City, and what we're trying to do today is to give a little history of hip-hop dance, so you know what the names of the steps are and the history behind them. We're right here in Lower Manhattan, near a bunch of clubs that we used to frequent. So what we're going to try and do is break down a few steps and the history behind them, like the Smurf, the Prep, old school street dance, rather old school social dance, that primarily made up what we call hip hop today. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you a dance called the Smurf. It's from the early 80s. It's just really a street and social dance, and it got incorporated into hip hop in the late 80s. This is the Smurf. Smurf, yo.
What's up, y'all? This is Link from Elite Force. What I'm about to show y'all is a dance from the mid-'80s, and this dance is called the Prep. That's the prep.
What's up, y'all? So this next dance is called a Reebok, named after the Reebok shoe because it was popular at the time and everybody wore them and, you know, came up with a dance and named it after the shoe.
This next dance, this dance is called the WAP. Where it came from, ask him. All I know is called the WAP.
It's called the WAP because it was made after a record called Do the WAP by B Fats. And when the record played, you did the dance.
And actually in the record, he told you how to do the dance. That was like what a lot of dances, they told you how to do it. That's the WAP.
What's up, y'all? So this next dance is called the Cabbage Patch. It's named after a toy, a doll in the early 80s. Social dance incorporated into hip hop.
What's up, y'all? Back again. This next dance is called the Happy Feet. I guess when you did it, you looked so happy, your feet was moving everywhere. Can't tell you where it actually started and come from, but I can tell you this is the name of the dance.
And the dance was done to primarily to Dougie
Fresh, the show.
Rick, the show. When that song
Came on, everybody did
did
this dance.
called the Happy Feet. Last dance is called the Fila, and in Brooklyn they call it the Rambo because a lot of people got robbed to this song, and the chant of "Go Rambo." When you heard that, you knew something bad was going to happen. So it's originally called the Fila, but you know some places they call it the Rambo because you know Brooklyn was in the house. Now you see a whole group of people doing that around in a circle.
Move.
Look out for your chain.
songs that we didn't know that were in between the middle until we got deeper into the culture. And that's how we got involved with house music. Well, the way I got introduced to house music was a good friend of mine and Link's out in Canarsie. His name was Buddy. And this was a guy who used to frequent the garage. And he used to play music, a DJ at the house parties that we used to have at the house. Now, when I say the house parties, I mean not the house music that you know. This was a party in our apartments. We clear all the furniture out in the living room and throw a party. Like, oh, Friday night, we're having a party at my house. So everybody would come. And what he would do is he would sneak the house music in with a lot of disco. He would play some disco music. He would play the popular hip hop and reggae. And then he would sneak the house music in. And that's how we got introduced to it. Because we were already open off of songs that were kind of like borderline. Songs that we didn't know that were in between the middle until we got deeper into the culture, you know, the music. And then that's when we wanted to hear more of that music, and that's how we got involved with house music. When did it start? Oh, when I came to know house was like around '86, but I'm quite sure that house had existed long before that. So I would say maybe mid '80s.
Yeah. Early 80s, around like, you know, from what I've heard, you know, 82, 83, 84, it was still, you know, perceived as disco, but it started to take off, and that around that time, by around 84, 85, 86, is when it, you know, the house sound was born, and, you know, as a dance, the culture came out of that, you know.
They used to call it club music too.
Yeah.
Because they used to call house dancing club dancing,
Yeah.
because this was the dance that you did in the club, and that was the music that you heard in the club. So they called it club
If it wasn't
music.
R&B and it wasn't
Yeah.
hip hop,
Yeah.
you know, they didn't have a name for it, so they just called it club music, or, you know, popular culture, dance music.
Right.
Now the term house is from Chicago, and it was named after a club called a Warehouse, and it's where the sound is, you know, was formed, or I guess, and with what was it, Larry Levan, and most of the popular DJs at the time played at this club, and they dubbed the music that they played, because it wasn't disco anymore, but it wasn't, you know, and it wasn't hip hop, it wasn't, you know, just R&B, so they dubbed it house after this popular place because this is where that music became, you know, they would make tapes of the music at this place, and people would buy the tapes, and they would, you know, where you get this tape from? Oh, it's from the warehouse. This is, you know, warehouse music and house music, and that's what they called it. And, you know, the dance was, you know, the dance is named after the music.
Well, the fashion back then is, like, most of the clubs had dress codes. So you couldn't go to a club the way I'm dressed right now. You couldn't go with sneakers, jeans, and
Baseball cap,
jacket.
t-shirts.
So we had to dress nice. So you had to have like a nice shirt, a decent pair of pants on, slacks preferably, and, you know, people started wearing ties. And then, like Stretch was saying the other day, we used to wear Jabot pants, a nice pair of shoes, Zodiacs or Doc Martens. Some shoes had the metal on the front, some shoes didn't, but, you know, that you had that look on your feet and on your legs. And then you had a nice shirt and a short tie, not a long tie.
A short tie.
No jacket, but just the vest.
Yeah.
And then that became the uniform. Whenever somebody saw a short tie vest, the Jabots and the Zodiacs or the Martins,
You were a house dancer.
they automatically knew.
You
They
were a
knew.
club dancer. You know, you knew where this person was going based on how they were dressed. You knew what clubs they went to, what they were into based on, you know, how they were dressed. It's the same as like back in the days in locking. The lockers were dressed a certain way, and when you got to the spot, you knew who was locking and who wasn't. Well, it's the same thing in house. Another popular, you know, thing in the late 80s was polka dots. You know, people used to rock polka dots. You know, it just became, yeah, little dots, big dots, yeah, ties and all kinds of stuff. And also suspenders and, you know, blazers. You know, in the hip hop clubs, you didn't have a dress code. But in the R&B clubs or in the the popular clubs that didn't play just hip hop, they didn't want the street element. They wanted people to come.
No hats, no sneakers.
Yeah, no jeans, no sneakers, no hats. So you had to dress up. You had to look, like, not like you were, coming off the street, but you were coming to party. So that gave birth to a whole culture of, dressing a certain way to go to the club. It wasn't, people wanted to dress up. It was, you had to, and it just became, a culture by itself.
Yo, what's up? We're here now, and we're going to talk about old school house.
And what we're going to demonstrate today is some of the steps in house, the names of the steps and how they're done. The late 80s all the way through the 90s to now.
So we're taking you from Studio 54 when Larry Levan left the garage and moved to Studio 54, and one of the steps that they were doing around that time. So we're going to go into that and then work our way on to something else, right?
Yeah. And some of the clubs, you got to understand that here in New York City, a lot of the clubs that played hip hop also played house, just on different nights. Like Studio 54 had, house was on Thursday, right?
Yeah.
They had hip hop on Wednesday. So, a lot of these clubs, also like Nels played house and they played hip hop. The Red Zone had a hip hop night and a house night. And a lot of the dancers migrated from hip hop into house. Also because house was a lot less dangerous.
Right. And they closed down a lot of the house clubs, hip hop clubs anyway. So
Yeah.
A lot of the hip hop heads became house heads because there was no place to go.
So right now we're going to demonstrate some of the steps, and one of the first steps I'm going to show is called stomping. Stomping. All right, this next step is called a loose leg, primarily named after this gentleman here, Loose Leaf. It was one of the steps that he always did, and it was such a, foundational step to everyone. When we saw him do it, we all copied it. So it's the loose legs, Big Leaf. Loose legs. Legs.
The next step that I'm going to do for you is called the train, which is a variation from the skate. They're both related. Train and skate are related to one another.
So this is the train. Train. Next step is called the farmer, and Khalif is going to explain where the name comes from.
Well, actually, the name was something that we had as Dance Fusion. We had a meeting in 2000, and we decided to call the step the farmer. The origin of the step is from Africa. It's originally an African step, but we've adopted it in-house, and we call it the farmer. Farmer. The next step that I'm about to do for you is called the swirl.
The swirl is a variation of a samba step from Brazil. It's fairly similar, and you'll see how it's merged into house. This is the swirl. Swirl. So this last step is called a Jack in the Box. It's originally a step created by Khalif's brother Ramir and Which Way Shah.
Which way?
Just playing around in the club, and we all watched them and followed, and and later on it was called a Jack in the Box. So this is what it is. Jack in the Box. Hip-hop really was established, Right now we're going to discuss what would be considered, in hip-hop terms, the middle school hip-hop dance, from, say, 1990, 1991 to, like, 1997, something like that. In the early to mid-90s to the late 90s. And at this time, this is what I refer to as the video age, because prior to that, there were
no videos.
Yeah, there were plenty of videos, but there weren't as many. During the 90s, everybody had dancers. They used dancers in damn near every video, and hip hop really, was established as, a force. Like, this is the dance. It was all over the world, and everybody saw it. So the middle school time is what, I like to call the video age. Because prior to that, there were videos, but, there were only certain videos by certain artists. By the mid-90s, all artists had dancers in their videos. In the early 90s, I like to call it, the Das EFX era, because that's when everybody had dreadlocks, And everywhere you went, Das EFX was so popular. If you had locks, everyone was like, they Das EFX. They straight from the underground, blah, blah, blah. Well, Milli Vanilli is prior to that, But, I like to think of around that time as the Timberland age. It's when everybody started rocking Timbs. You know, prior to that, you know, only some folks, you know, wore Timbs, but everybody started rocking Timbs.
Timbs, cross colors, Carl Canal.
Hoodie.
Yeah, hoodies. Sweatshirts were big. Sweatshirts and baseball caps. You had the hoodie over with the cap. Your pants hang low. Your Timbs on.
Carhartt jackets.
Carhartt.
TLC made a song, right? Cap to the back.
Hat to the back.
Hat to the back. Pants down low.
Oh, Polo was in, you know, for forever. Polo's really old school.
Polo and Guess?
Yeah, that's from the 80s.
That's from the 80s, but they still maintain.
Surfaced in like 90, 91,
Also,
92.
yeah, that's this era, the middle school era, is the Tommy Hilfiger era.
Yeah.
Because that's when Tommy Hilfiger took off.
Yeah.
Without, you know, that time, you know, that's the era where Ralph Lauren gave way to Tommy Hilfiger.
Right.
Prior to that, it was low.
Yeah.
In the 90s, it became Tommy Hilfiger. You had the, you know, everybody had the backpacks, you had the jeans, the jackets, the bubble vest. You know,
you had something, and then if you ain't have Tommy, you had Helly Hansen.
Yeah. The ski wear was, you know, huge at that time.
Spider.
Yeah, Helly Hansen, Spider.
We was wearing stuff that you wouldn't think they would wear as a regular dress code, like a regular clothes. Some they wearing only on slopes and skiing.
Yeah.
We was wearing to the club, North Face.
Yep. That's when, you know, the East Coast, that whole dressing style is all East Coast. New York. It's all East Coast, and you can see that it spread from New York all the way down Atlanta, everywhere. And it was, you know, when you dressed like that, you knew you were from the East Coast, because the West Coast, you know, they dressed completely different. You know, they didn't dress, they had the khakis, the chucks and all that. We didn't rock any of that then. So, you know, that was, you know, the real, you know, underground, straight, street head. You knew this is a hip hop cat. And that's when, you know, mainstream America really, you know, wanted to be down with OPP and all of that.
Yeah.
So right now we're going to demonstrate for y'all what's considered the middle school. Steps that were between, you know, old school and new school. What we consider old school hip hop and new school hip hop. These steps were done in the, you know, early 90s through to the mid, you know, towards the end of the 90s. And the first step we're going to demonstrate, it's called a crisscross really, but we called it the Party Machine because it's a TV show that came on late nights on the weekends, and this is the one dance that everybody could do on that show, so we called it the Party Machine.
Which Stretch is about to demonstrate. Stretch.
Party Machine. What's up, y'all? So this next step is called the Running Man. It's basically the bridge between the old school and the middle school. And it's based off of a movie by Arnold Schwarzenegger called The Running Man. And it's just basically a step that makes you look like you're running in place. Right now we're going to have Link demonstrate some variations on the Running Man.
That's the Running Man.
What's up, y'all? So right now we're going to do a dance called the Roger Rabbit, which is based on a film, you know, Who Stole Roger Rabbit? And it's basically the Running Man done backwards. And we done. All right, this next dance is called a Steve Martin. It's based off the comedian Steve Martin on Saturday Night Live, and it was created by a dancer for EPMD by the name of Steezo. Link's gonna demonstrate.
Steve Martin.
Yeah. So right now we're going to do a dance called the Bart Simpson. It's from ATL, it's Atlanta, and it's based on the character Bart Simpson, the Bartman. We did this dance in
Remember the Time.
yeah, in the video with Michael Jackson, Remember the Time.
Well, wait, while you do it, show a variation how it,
Yeah,
how
we're
we
gonna show
did
different
it,
versions.
then we changed it.
Okay. This is the original way. This is how we did it. That's the Bart Simpson. So, next dance is called the Pepper Seed. It's one of the dances from dance hall, reggae, and it shows reggae's influence on hip hop. Link's gonna demonstrate.
Pepper Seed.
So this next dance originally didn't have a name. It was a dance that I made up mixing the Steve Martin with the crisscross or the party machine. And we called it the BK Bounce because we all from Brooklyn and we put it on the map. So I'm gonna demonstrate it for you now. Brooklyn. What's up, y'all? So this next dance is another dance from dance hall and reggae. It's called the Butterfly, straight out of Jamaica, and again shows reggae's influence on hip hop. We're going to demonstrate together. That's the Butterfly. this is house. You know, it was established what the movements were at that time, and this is house dance. Right now we're going to speak on, you know, house dancing from the 90s, which in hip hop would be called a middle school.
Or actually at that time, the music was kind of changing because at first in the 80s you had a lot of music that was coming from Chicago. You know, that's where it started, Chicago and in Detroit. But a lot of producers from New York as well as New Jersey started to become more popular. You know, like Junior Vasquez, he had a song out that was pretty hot at the time. And then you had a bunch of people like Camacho and just to name a few, Jovan, that, well, he's from Brooklyn, Jovan is from Brooklyn, but you know, Camacho's from Jersey. They were really making a lot of good music. And so we had like a lot of East Coast flavor going on here. And that's the thing that kind of changed from the 80s as opposed to now. More producers were coming from this city and they were really representing.
I think at that time was when house had, around the early 90s, 90, 91, 92, was when house really hit mainstream. You had, you know, house videos, you know, big, you know, mainstream house records like
Crystal
Waters, which
CeCe
you know,
Peniston.
We worked with Khalif dance for. CeCe Peniston had finally, we worked with her, you know, and around that time is when house had gone mainstream. You know, it was across the board, across America, and it was, you know, people in Middle America knew, they called it dance music, but they knew what it was, you know, and then that's when the steps kind of like came into, you know, their own. Like this was it, you know, specific steps were considered house.
Yep.
You know, it wasn't, you know, no longer, oh, this is part of hip hop or blah, 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 from this is from that. This is house. You know, It was established what the movements were at that time. And in the 90s is where the movements were established that this is house dance.
Especially amongst the dancers, you know, more so than the public.
Yeah.
Because the public kind of like just thought every type of dance they see is breakdancing if they're not from here.
The public started seeing it as they house dances was because the way we were dressed. You know, we didn't wear the sneakers and the baseball caps or any of that. We wore blazers and ties and hard bottom shoes.
You know, style of dress is what really differentiated the culture from, you know, other cultures, from the disco era, from the hip hop era. House had its own culture. You know, people rocked specific shoes. You had Doc Martens that were big. The jeans at the time were Jabot. Everybody rocked Jabot jeans, you know. And, you know, you dressed to go to the club.
Had
you
a small tie on.
Yeah, you had ties, you had button-up shirts, you had blazers on. You know, you didn't wear baseball caps. You had, you know, hats, you know.
People used to steal the Volkswagen signs.
Yeah, it was
off
at the
car.
Volkswagen sign and put them on their shoe or around their neck, you know. So, and that's when, you know, it was established that, you know, when you saw people dressed like this, you knew where they were going. You know what clubs they were going to. They're house heads, you know.
You wasn't house dancing.
You're a house head.
House head, grasshoppers, bango heads.
Bango.
Yep.
That's what they used to call us back in the day.
What's up, y'all? With a stretch.
What's up, Big Leaf?
We're standing in front of the legendary Tunnel nightclub. At this place, you know, they played house first before they played hip hop. And this is one of the places that I actually met up with Khalif and Link.
Yo, this was a spot that every Wednesday night people came to for a college night. And this is where some of the best dancers in New York City came to get down at that time. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna share with you some of the dances that we were doing at that time.
We're gonna show you one of the first steps is a salsa step. It's derived from its name. It comes from salsa, but we do it to house music. salsa.
The next step I'm gonna do for you is called the salsa hop. And I'm gonna do a couple of variations of the salsa hop, but I'm gonna start out with the basic part of the step.
All right, this next step is a dance we call the sidewalk. Actually comes from tap dancing, but changed it up for house. And Khalif is gonna demonstrate. This dance that we did, it was called a sidewalk. I'll explain this because it's like you're walking to your side with a kick. It's from tap, and called it the sidewalk because you're moving in different directions, you know, side to side. The next step is a variation of the sidewalk, which is what we call the crosswalk. You cross in front and not behind, and I'm going to demonstrate.
Take it away.
So the sidewalk is here. Crosswalk is in front. Crosswalk. All right, this next step,
It's called the crossroads.
it's a traveling step. It's similar to what they do in top rock and b-boy and in jazz, pas de bourrée across the floor. So Khalif is gonna demonstrate that for you.
All right, this next step is called the setup.
It's called a setup because you use it to set up your moves, and it's from a tap dance step, which is a variation that we use in house. Basically, it's a skip and a hop, and it's called a setup. Setup. That's the sidewalk. Crossroads. Set up.
We're dancers. I'm a dancer first. You can put the style anywhere you want. To explain the difference between us as, you know, hip hop dancers, house dancers, whatever, those are labels. And people like to stick labels on you so they can, you know, understand you better. But the whole point, the difference between us and everyone else, I would say, is we never looked at it as, oh, I'm a hip hop dancer, or I'm a house dancer, or I'm this, or I'm that. We dance. You play the music, we dance. If you play house music, we're gonna dance house. If you play hip hop, we're gonna dance hip hop. If you play electro music, we're gonna pop. If you play something funky, we might start locking. We might start breaking. You know, we did what.
Go back.
If you played, if you played reggae, we're gonna start doing reggae.
Right.
You do what the music dictates, and that's what I think people, you know, a lot of people come up with these labels because they can't do that. Like if you say, oh, Link is just a hip hop dancer, then you only think, oh, well, if you play hip hop, he's cool, but if he plays, you know, if I play, you know, Looking for the Perfect Beat, Link can't dance. Nonsense. If you play Looking for the Perfect Beat or Planet Rock, Link will still get up in your ass. Okay, so. You know, or like, oh, Khalif is a house dancer. Oh, so if you played Pete Rock, Khalif can't dance to it? Nonsense, you know, and that's the problem with the labels. Like, you know, it's what people, you know, they forget that before it's a style, it's just a dance. You know, before locking was called locking, Campbell locking, he was doing, you know, the robot shuffle and the funky chicken. There was a social dances. All dance is social dance. Before it's a style, it's a dance, you know, and we always put style second. You know, dance was always first, the style was secondary. And a lot of that had to do also with in the house culture. You know, when I got into it and I met up with them, we were always deemed as hip hop dancers. You know, and oh, those guys, oh, they're not house, they're hip hop. Yeah, but get in the circle with me and then tell me what I'm doing. You know, and a lot of those people that were, oh, they're hip hop, they don't dance anymore. We're dancers. I'm not a locker, I'm not a popper, I'm not a hip hop dancer, I'm not any of that. I'm a dancer first. You can put the style anywhere you want. You play the music and I'll dance to it. And that's what defines me, the music, not the labels. Well, I would say the new school era starts at the turn of the century, really. Right now, over the last, I'd say, 6-7 years, hip-hop has branched out and become, you know, I mean, it's been a, you know, multinational phenomenon, but the music, you know, at one point, New York was the center of the universe for hip-hop, and then that shifted to, you know, to the West Coast. They had their moment. Well, now it's the South's moment. And all of the South, that music is hip-hop music. What people don't seem to understand is that wherever the music takes off, there's always a dance to go with it. And most of the new school dances have come out of the South because that's where the music is. That's the most popular music. And whenever there's a popular music, there's going to be a dance to go with it.
Exactly.
Because music and dance are yin and yang. And each region has their own kind of music. You know, case in point, New York has our hip hop. Atlanta has their sound and their dances to go with it. Houston has their sound and dances to go with it. You know, the Bay Area has their own thing, you know, so yeah, Chicago has their thing. So, you know, it's hip hop because of the music and the culture, but each place has their own thing, you know, what they call it. Like in Chicago, they have their, you know, footworking and their music, you know, is juking. And then in Memphis, they have a different style of juking. And then in Atlanta, they have, you know, their dances. In the culture of as a whole is still hip hop. You know, that's what, you know, is considered the new school now, because, you know, each place puts their own stamp on it and brings their own,
Is that actually,
thing to it.
it's like in a good way, because actually it's almost going back to what we said in the old school. When you heard a song, you knew the dance.
Exactly.
Because now it's more like, it's like artists is making songs with dances.
Yeah, they're making a dance to go with it. Case in point, Soulja Boy.
Yeah.
The reason that record
Yeah,
took off is because he
of
had
the
a dance to go
called
with
the
the
Soulja
record.
Boy.
You know, and he filmed his own video and put it on YouTube to go with the song, and the song took off because everybody did the dance.
And
You
and
and
Soulja Boy,
the chicken noodle soup.
Chicken Noodle Soup, Walk It Out.
Yeah,
Everything is coming back to what Missy started saying first to all entertainers. Let's get back to the dancing. What she said to, you know, on her song, enough with all that other stuff. Let's get back to the dancing and partying.
yeah. The reason
why
this.
we do
And,
hip hop.
You know, the new school is just, you know, they're taking it back to how it was done before. You know, you had specific songs that had specific dances. Well, now you still have specific songs that have specific dances to go with them. And that's what keeps the culture alive and keeps it popular and keeps it moving, you know, and keeps the creativity and you know, the culture alive. And that's what makes it fun. It's always, for me, it's really fascinating to see a new dance and have to learn that dance. When I first saw the Harlem Shake, I saw my nephew do it. And I was amazed, like, what is this? Like, you know, when I saw the videos, I was like, eh. But when I saw my nephew actually rock it, I was like, nah, this is nuts. The dance, what saves the dance is the kids. You know, the kids, they take a dance and they show you how to do it. And you really see the essence of the dance because they really feel the music. If you really want to see what hip hop is supposed to look like or the feeling of it, just play the music and watch the kids dance. And that's where the inspiration comes from.
What's up, y'all?
What's up? What's up?
So right now we're in Fort Greene in the park where we shot a live TV record shop in
Live.
Brooklyn, you know, back in 1992. So right now we're gonna run through some of the new school steps that have come about since around 2000 to now 2008. A lot of the hip hop steps are not from New York. They're steps that come from other cities in America that had hip hop, you know, their own hip hop culture that have been adapted, you know, across the board. So one of the first steps is called the Monastery.
From St. Louis.
From St. Louis. It's named after a club called the Monastery. And a girl in the club is who made up the dance. The guys were imitating her, and then the dance took off and everybody started doing the dance. Link is gonna demonstrate.
Monastery.
All right, this next dance is a gangster's dance.
Gangster.
Meaning real gangsters, Crips.
Meaning, don't do this dance in LA, some parts of Brooklyn, some parts of New York, because they don't take it as a dance.
Now, first off, it's called the C Walk. The C is for the word Crip. Crip is a gang started in the 70s in Los Angeles, opposite of the Bloods. And the C Walk is the Crips dance. It's a dance that represents the gang and, you know, the culture surrounding the gang.
Not only that, you know, God rest the dead, peace to Skeeter Rabbit, who told me this dance was a setup dance. When they were about to fight, or after they finish fighting. So do not do this dance in certain places because you might be the dance.
So I'm going to demonstrate in memory of Skeeter Rabbit the sea walk. Sea walk. All right, so this next dance is called the Bankhead Bounce. It's a dance out of the Bankhead section of Atlanta in the South. And this dance came about in the mid-90s. It's done, you know, in celebration of the Dirty Dirty. And it's one of the first dances to come out of Atlanta that you know, gain national recognition. Link is going to demonstrate. Bankhead Bounce.
Bankhead Bounce.
All right, this next dance is one of the newest dances from the Dirty South called the Walk It Out. And I'm going to demonstrate. Out. All right, this next dance, straight out of NYC from Harlem. It's called the Harlem Shake, made popular from an old school dancer called Al B, R.I.P. He did a dance called the Al B, and the Harlem Shake came out of that dance. And Link is going to demonstrate. Harlem Shake.
Harlem Shake.
All right, this next dance is called the ATL Stomp, straight out of Hotlanta. And it's one of the newest dances that's come out in the last year or so.
You can also see this dance in Usher's video, Yeah. At the end, they tell you ATL Stomp. So you can see that.
And I'm going to demonstrate. ATL Stomp. All right, this next and last dance is from New York City, again from Harlem. It's called the Tone Wop. It's a dance coming out of Harlem over the last couple of years, and it's gained national recognition. You can see Chris Brown do it in the running video, and we both are going to demonstrate. Tone Wop. what the culture behind it is. And, you know, that's a resurgence in the new school across the board.
We're gonna talk about 2000 to now. And what happened with 2000, well, I would say like from 99, the late 90s, house had a decline. It wasn't as popular. It wasn't as popular in Asia. It wasn't as popular in America. And there was just like, you know, it was dance fusion. You know, most of the people from fusion, we were the ones still carrying the torch, pushing it, still trying to teach it. A lot of teaching was done in Asia, but still it was kind of dying out. What went on here was Tony McGregor, Which Way Sha started to jack. And when they started to jack, because jacking was something that wasn't done back in the days, this was something that they started in 2000. Jacking, the term jacking means fucking in the club. That's from Chicago, that's just a Chicago term. But they took that term, being Sha, Which Way Sha, and Tony McGregor, and also Brian Green. And what they did with that is they came up,
Developed emotion.
with emotion, a movement. Now, how it was explained to me with this movement, and this is important, was that they were trying to figure out how can we teach people who don't listen to the music and people who aren't on beat, how can we get them to understand the feeling of the dance? So they came up with that movement, but with that movement, a very important thing happened. It became popular. People all over wanted to become a part of house because the people who did hip hop, they kind of saw a similar movement in what they were doing, and that's how they were able to make the crossover. Like we say, we're all dancers, but then there's certain movements like the Roger Rabbit, like the crisscross, that skate, that crossover from dance to dance. So that was a movement that people who mostly listen to hip hop could really vibe with. And like I say, it became popular. So that for us, it kind of changed the dance. So we had to adapt with the times, where we were doing mostly footwork. Now we added mixed a little bit of jack, what we call jack, into the dance. And that changed the dance from what you see now. I don't know, now it's prevalent, it's everywhere, you know. And so I think that's a good thing for me, because more people are interested in the dance. And now we can kind of like guide them, because now once they've learned that, now they want to go back and learn about the foundation.
Just to pick up on what he was saying, I think the dances are tied to the music. The decline of house music also led with the decline of the dance, because a lot of people weren't listening to house, you know, like it was in the early 90s, in the late 90s. I think turn of the century, you know, house picked up in Europe and in America with a different sound, you know, a mixture of electronica and a more tribal sound, you know, drum, and then what they call the broken beats. You know, a lot of house picked up because they started doing what was called broken beats. Now that whole broken beat culture came about, you know, alongside the whole jack thing. So you had jacking and the broken beat, and when you brought that together, the culture came back full throttle.
That and the techie music, like producers like Theo Parrish from out of Detroit.
Yeah, with that whole, that electronic sound, you know, that's what brought house as a music back, and then the dance came back with it, you know, on top of that. So what happens now is people, you know, they look at what they see as house now, and they see similarities to other dances, other styles, and then that's, you know, to get people to get into something, you got to give them a point of reference. So a lot of people's point of reference in house is through hip hop. You know, for b-boys, it's through breaking. Alongside of, you know, the resurgence of house, where a lot of b-boys were going to the house clubs in the mid to late 90s. A lot of b-boys got into house because they wanted to learn, you know, the tops. You know, the top rockin' house, you know, was so, you know, it appealed to b-boys because they wanted to learn how to get, you know, how to dance. you know, and a lot of the b-boys, the younger b-boys, I'll use, you know, like Breaks Crew and Step Fiends as an example. Those are two crews out of New York. They had a lot of b-boys and that got into house and started mixing the tops and the steps of house with their breaking. And so one in particular, Shan S, who always, he was a b-boy first, you know, he took, you know, the b-boy that he knew and mixed it with his house also and took house to another level. And that led a lot of other people to, you know, do the same. And this was all around the same time, the late 90s into the turn of the century. So a lot of factors contributed to what, you know, you see as a new school house resurgence. But again, it's always, you know, some of the same people, you know, involved in that. You know, a lot of the things like, I'll use case in point, a move that comes from gymnastics that went into b-boying that crossed over into house, the hollow back. You know, the first time that, you know, cats saw a hollow back was B-Boy Float. We were doing a video for Mariah, Fantasy, and Float, a lot of people don't know this, but Float was in that video. And what happened was Float was doing all kinds of hollow backs. Ejo is who saw the hollow backs that Float were doing, and Float showed him, and Ejo got into it immediately and started rocking the hollow backs. You know, and then other cats seeing Ejo do that, you know, started, and that's how, you know, that came into house alongside of the same thing with like capoeira. You know, when b-boys saw a lot of the capoeira moves, you know, they saw the similarities. Well, house dancers saw a lot of the similarities in the jinga, you know, in house, you know, and so each style influences the other. You know, when you go back to that whole labeling thing, you can't label a person, you know, as something unless you know what that is. If you label, you know, somebody a hip-hop dancer, you have to actually know what hip-hop dance is. If you label somebody a house dancer, you know, you got to know what house is. House has its own vocabulary and culture. You know, a lot of misconceptions have happened over the years here in America, you know, turn of the century again, where a lot of guys dancing to house music in the club and are called house dancers, but they're not doing the dance that we're doing. You know, and that's another thing that had to be corrected. You know, I've seen videos on YouTube of cats, oh, he's house dancing, blah, 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 and I look at that and they're just jumping around. And I'm like, that's not house. Not house. House has a culture, it has vocabulary, it's, you know, it's the same thing. You wouldn't see it, you know, you don't call somebody that does this a popper just because they did a wave, you know. So, you know, that's another thing that's going on in the culture now. People really want to learn what, you know, what the dance is, what the vocabulary is, what the culture behind it is. And, you know, that's a resurgence in the new school across the board, not just in house, but, you know, in b-boying and popping and everything. People want to know their history. You know, you can't know where you're going until you know where you've come from.
What's up, y'all?
What's up, y'all?
We're in Fort Greene, Brooklyn.
BK.
This is the park where we shot a live TV, Record Shopper from Brooklyn, 1992. And we're back here today to show you some more steps from house. One of the steps we're gonna show you is called a tip-tap-toe. It's basically on your heel, and you shift your weight from your heel to your toe to the beat. And I'm gonna demonstrate it. Tip-tap-toe.
This next step,
It's called the scribble foot. And you basically scribble your name on the ground with your feet. Khalif is going to show you how. All right, so right now we're gonna do one of the steps that crossed over from hip hop. In hip hop, we kind of called it the party machine or the crisscross. And for house, we call it the crisscross. And it's a little bit different in house because of the tempo of the music. And Khalif is gonna demonstrate. All right, this next step is called a heel toe. It's originally a dance from reggae that crossed over through hip hop into house. And it's kind of done different ways. I'll demonstrate how it's done to reggae and then the hip hop version, which we also do to house. It's kind of like the James Brown. Heel toe. All right, this is another step that has crossed over from hip hop into house. It's the Roger Rabbit, and Khalif is going to demonstrate. It's still done the same way in hip hop, but a lot faster because house has a quicker tempo. All right, this next dance is called the skate. Yet another dance that crossed over from hip hop into house. It's an old school social dance. You mimic skating in a roller rink, but without skates. It's called a skate, and I'll demonstrate. Skate. All right, this next step is called a dolphin. It's from original house dance style called lofting, which is basically a sister of b-boying. As b-boying went with breaks, lofting went with disco, which gave way to house. And it's basically a dive, and the motion is like a dolphin diving in the water. So thus the name, the dolphin. And Khalif is going to demonstrate.
message that people have to realize that this is, you know, dancing is a spiritual thing too, and it's something that, you know, it's your self-expression. You're telling your story when you dance, and what I mean by that is by copying someone. You need your own identity when you're out there, and we all have the ability to have our own identity, you know. And as far as teaching is concerned, I said it once, I'll say it again. Teaching this art form takes time. If you take a class for a year, I don't care if it's with me, if it's with Shaness, if it's with Brian, Marjorie, anybody that's teaching house, you need more than a year before you go into another room and try to show somebody the movements. If you do not know the foundation, if you have not mastered any of the foundation, then I don't understand how you can go and teach. Teaching is more than choreography. Choreography is something that is done in an hour and a half. People gather that from you. They'll know it like 2 hours after that. 3 hours after that, they can't remember what they learned, or the day after. That's no good. You have to give people things that they can grow with, and you have to be able to give them the information. If you're not able to give them the information, then they won't be able to grow as a dancer. Peace and love. Remember that this art form is not about battling. This is about love. If you listen to the vocals and the music, they're not telling you to hurt or harm anybody. They're speaking about love and upliftment, and that's all it's about. And that's all I gotta say.
For one, I respect all styles. But no matter what you say, all styles, it's all dance. Dance is before the style. Learn that first. And then once you learn that, you learn what you're doing. You can't say jazz is hip hop, this is hip hop, this is hip hop. No, hip hop's hip hop. Lockin's locking, poppin's poppin', ballet's ballet, jazz is jazz. But they're all just dance. And get out of the mirror, because everything you do, every mistake that's been made is a new dance step. So if you don't make a mistake, you ain't bringing nothing new into the game. You're not helping hip hop. You can't clean it up. It's meant to be raw and, you know, dirty. It's not meant to be neat and tight and, you know, clean. Yeah, you got clean dancers, you got, you know, some say sloppy dancers, but for me that's abstract. That's what, you know, that's their real feeling. If you in the mirror, you making a feeling. And you trying to, you know, clean up something you doing wrong, but if you actually look at it, the wrong thing you're doing is thinking about doing it. You not feeling it. That's the first wrong part in any dance. If you don't feel what you're doing, you're wrong from starting. So my thing is, get out of the mirror, go in the club, go with your friends, make them dance. Get away from the bar sometime. That's my thing.
My message to the dancers and all of the people that will watch this video, read my shirt. It says, I am hip hop. What does that represent? You represent the culture. The culture doesn't represent you. You represent the culture. Whenever, everything about me is hip hop. Everything that I do is hip hop. And I actually care about that statement. You know, this isn't a stepping stone. It isn't, I don't do this for attention or to make people like me. I really don't care if you like me. I could care less. And I'm quick to give you the finger. So, you know, for me, it's not what I do, it's how I live. And, you know, if you're interested in the culture as a fad, cool, do you, that's cool. But don't come around me, because, you know, I live this, and, you know, if you really want to be a part of the culture and represent something, don't represent it from here, represent it from here.
Everybody, Tootsie Roll! Tootsie Roll!
Take it away, Hank.
Shut up or shut the
Dance for the music, to the music, and because of the music.
Add MTV information.
Show them why we give ourselves 5, because we know that we bad. The 5. You were peaking, and the lockers took it, put it in a dance, and called it the snake.
The reason why they call it CC's, back in the day, Legs was in a crew called Crazy Commandos.
People known it as windmills, but it's called continuous backspin.
Or we refer to now as Boog style. But it was created by Baloo Sam, my brother, in 1976.
It was basically from the waist down, but also up. Beat came up when 80, like around 80, 81.
決して見ること知ることのないその裏側を歴代ジャパン王者たちが解き明かすヒストリー・オブ・ジャパン・ダンス・ディライト 15th アニバーサリー
スタート地点じゃないですかね。越えなきゃいけない壁みたいな。
女の子だけでも絶対負けたくないっていう
野望がでかくなった。そこからさらに
自分たちの居場所をなんか見つけられる。
熱くなる、ぶつかり合う。目指した人だけが取れるっていう。
誰が勝つかほんまに分かれへん。経験っていうのが
ダンサーとしての職業の可能性っていうの
希望が見えました。
明るい未来が見えました。
今始まりやったよなみたいな。
ボーントゥーロック第3ステージを迎え踊るために生まれてきたやつらが集まった昨年のジャパン。そして